From the sunshine, the ocean, and the beaches of the West Coast to the heartbeat of the Big Ten for many decades, and that is the Heartland of America. Let's check in with our Heartland heroes in the cornfields of the Midwest. And when you think about corn, you think about the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And that's where we're going to start with these four teams. This I also like to call the quad of hate. There's a lot of trophy games. There's a lot of animosity within this group. I love talking about these four teams together. You know, over the past handful of seasons with the Nebraska Cornhuskers, I haven't shied about the expectations that I have each and every single year. It seems like these last couple of years where Nebraska, I felt, has had good rosters, right? They've had good play on the defensive side of the ball. They've had some things that can come together on the offensive side of the ball, and I've picked them to win 8 games. I've picked them to win, 9 games. I've picked them to kind of be that team that a lot of people out there expect them to be. And I haven't shied away from that, and I haven't regretted necessarily picking them to finish that high, but I've kind of gotten burned the last couple of years, haven't I? And a lot of people are looking at year 3 of Matt Rule, when he's made that jump at Temple, when he's made that jump at Baylor, that this could be the year at Nebraska for them to get it done. Now, their schedule kind of plays out pretty well. I will say that if they can bring it all together. But maybe like a lot of people, I'm not drinking as much Kool-Aid this offseason as I maybe have in years past. I think it's fair, like the biggest thing that needs to happen for Nebraska is Dana and Dylan need to click. Dana Holgorsen, of course, the offensive coordinator that took over very late in the process when they demoted Marcus Satterfield. That was long overdue, by the way. He's still on the staff, BTW. Then they brought in Dana Holgorsen very late, kind of off the street in this process. It was a little bit of an odd situation, but it seemed to click against Wisconsin a little bit later on during the season. But this is something where you need that Dylan Raiola second-year jump. You got a 5-star quarterback for a reason, and it's not to have 13 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. And that's what Dylan was like last year. Over 2,800 yards passing for the legacy at Nebraska. Now, here's the thing about Dylan. I thought for a true freshman, he started off pretty well. He started the season last year with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions throughout the first 5 games. But his final 8 games, 4 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. Look, when you throw out a true freshman quarterback, no matter how talented they are, there are going to be peaks and there are certainly going to be valleys as you kind of learn throughout the process. And then you go through a coordinator change and things that kind of happen throughout the season for Nebraska. You can understand why there would be bumps in the road, certainly right now. But this is like, we need to start to see the consistently great level of play from Dylan Raiola for this team to achieve what some people out there think that they possibly could achieve. And that's that 8 wins, that's that 9 wins, and so on and so forth in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, I think there's optimism that the Huskers could be better this season because of what Dylan has throwing, who he is going to be throwing the football to. Now, I say that, but I also want to make sure that I say that there's some weapons that are being lost from this wide receiver room. Your 2 leading receivers last year, Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair, no longer there. Your tight end, Thomas Fedoni, is no longer there. As well, Jalen Lloyd is no longer there. He transferred out. Like, those 4 guys made up 56% of Nebraska's receiving production a year ago. So what happens? You got to go to the portal to be able to kind of backfill on that type of production that's lost. And they did a pretty good job, I thought, with the 2 receivers that they brought in the transfer portal. Dane Key from Kentucky, 715 yards and 2 scores last year. Put up a lot of production there in the SEC. And Isaiah Hunter coming over from Cal, 578 yards and 5 touchdowns as well. I think those are going to be 2 of the main targets that Dylan Raiola is going to look to fairly consistently, I think, throughout this season. 2 other guys that are returning in this wide receiver group, Ja'Cory Barney had over 400 yards receiving last year. Janarian Bonner, guys showed some flashes, maybe not as consistently because of the receivers that I already was mentioning that were in that group. I think that were on the field a lot more than those young players out there, but I think you're expecting big-time jumps for both Ja'Cory and Janarian to really be those guys to fill out this wide receiver group and really be those explosive weapons down the field where this can be a passing offense that can be really good. And I think like it needs to be, because that's like historically Dana Holgorsen, I know he's had some good rushing offenses as well, and we'll get to that. But I mean, Dana has been a guy that where they've thrown the ball, air raid, type of deal. Throughout history as well there. Now, despite losing Fedoni, they've got decent depth, I think, at the tight end position. Heinrich Harburg is now going to be moving over there full-time. Luke Lindenmeyer. Carter Nelson was a 4-star, highly recruited tight end out of Ainsworth, Nebraska. He was at wide receiver, actually, last year. Now they're moving him back to that natural spot at tight end. I think the expectation, we'll see. I think Harburg's a pretty good athlete out there, and he's going to be involved certainly. But I think with Carter, I think that's the future NFL draft pick that I think is going to get going, whether it's this year or whether it's next year. I think you would really like to see Carter in his second year in the program really take that elevation. I think that you almost expect to see from a player like him that was as talented as him when he came out of high school, certainly as well. Now, that's all well and good, and I think there's certainly some players to throw to, but man, offensive line. It needs to be better in Lincoln. This is a group, you go late Scott Frost era, you could probably go the whole Scott Frost era, and then now the early Matt Rule era. It's been injuries on the offensive line, it's been inconsistent play on the offensive line, and I think it's really hampered this defense and maybe halted, or offense, I should say, and really halted the progress, certainly as well. Gunnar Gotola, Justin Evans, Henry Latofsky, all are returning from last year, and they were all in that starting lineup. And here's the thing, you throw out guys like Turner Corcoran, Teddy Prohaska. I mean, you talk about injuries, and Teddy Prohaska is that guy that's been injured multiple times throughout his career. But those guys, I think those are guys that you would expect to also be in that lineup as well. There's decent talent, I think, in this room with those guys that are returning out there. It's just you got to keep them healthy. That's been the thing, and that was the thing kind of last year that really came back to bite Nebraska a little bit. But not only do they have those returning players, how about some transfer additions? And you got some pretty good ones. Former 5-star Elijah Pritchett transfers over from Alabama. When he came out of high school, he was the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. Started 11 games over 3 years for the Crimson Tide, so maybe not exactly living up to that level that he was coming out of high school. The hope is that he can plug into this Nebraska system over there, maybe possibly at right tackle, and he can maybe start to live up to those expectations that he had coming out of high school. They also got a proven commodity from Notre Dame in Rocco Spindler. He was the number 6 interior offensive lineman, in the transfer portal. 23 starts at right guard for the Irish, and we know how good Notre Dame has been on the offensive line last year and that great rushing attack, and really, these last few years from Brian Kelly bleeding over, of course, to Marcus Freeman. So you factor in the transfers, you factor in what's returning, and you're like, okay, they got some depth. They got some guys that can maybe push the other side of the football around, and you can create some wins. You can create some advantages at the line of scrimmage. You can keep Dylan Raiola upright, and I think that's maybe the most important thing of it all, certainly. Let's talk about the run game, because this is an offensive line. They got, like I said, they got some good size to them, and this is an offensive line. We'll see how good that they are going to be in terms of run blocking and paving ways for these backs. Dante Dowdle, leading running back from last year, transfers out. He's off to Kentucky. He led the Huskers in rushing last year, 614 yards and 12 touchdowns. Emmett Johnson, your time is now, my man. Okay, you are going to be the guy, and there is not a lot of depth behind him. Emmett Johnson last year rushed for nearly 600 yards. I mean, Ramir Johnson's gone. Gabe Irvin Jr. is gone. Like the last couple of years, there's been like 3 or 4 guys every year in this Nebraska backfield, and they just don't have that type of depth. I think, at the running back position. So this is the Emmett Johnson show. And I say it's about time because, man, we've seen some big-time flashes from him, and we've seen some big-time promise from him. I believe that he can be a 1,000-yard rusher in this offense. I truly believe that, specifically if that offensive line stays healthy and they play really well, and you get back to playing that Nebraska football in the interior that fans of the Huskers are certainly used to seeing. So offensively, comes down to the connection between Dylan and Dana, and it comes down to really the health of the offensive line in terms of their success. Let's head over to the defensive side of the ball. Now, defense, this is a group that lost a lot. Okay, this is a group that, and they lost their defensive coordinator as well, Tony White. He's off to Tallahassee over there at Florida State. Now, John Butler was on staff. He takes over now as the defensive coordinator of this group. The first group that I want to focus on is the defensive line and the linebackers, really. The front seven. Let me just list off some names that are no longer there anymore. The two guys in the middle, Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson. Man, those guys were the heartbeat of this Nebraska defensive line over the last couple of years. Now, I know he didn't play a ton, but Prince Waluman Mielen transfers out to Ole Miss. He was very highly regarded in the portal. I think he was probably on track to be a big contributor this season, but he's no longer there. John Bullock and Mekhi Bayer, their top two linebackers from last year, they're gone. James Williams coming off the edge, he's gone as well. So they got to rebuild this front seven this year. I think like Cameron Lenhart, former five-star recruit, and Elijah Judy are guys that really need to step up and step up in a big way. But I think one guy that Nebraska fans are really excited about, former five-star recruit Williams Nwaneri transferring over from Missouri. Like, you look at Lenhart, you look at Nwaneri, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm feeling good about what Nebraska could be coming off the edge with some of these pass rushers, considering some of the players that they lost in the transfer portal. But here's the deal. In the interior, they lack size, especially considering the size of the Polar Bear and Ty Robinson that they've had the last couple of years. So if you have a team with a really big offensive line, a team that's going to be physical, running the ball between the guards, running the ball in the middle, how are they going to be able to hold up over a four-quarter game against that type of football team? Let's move to the linebacker group. I mentioned the losses that they have here, and I'm not, although they lose their top two linebackers there, I think there's some pieces to work with within this group. I think one player, a transfer that's coming in that I think Nebraska fans should be fairly excited about, Marcus Watson-Trent. He put up some gaudy numbers in the Sun Belt the last couple of years. He was the 2024 Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. He had over 100 tackles the last 3 years, and over 120 tackles in the last 2 seasons. I know it's a lower level of football, but sniffing out that many plays, I mean, that's good at any level. Dason McCullough is a guy that also is coming in. He started his career at Indiana, transferred over to Oklahoma. He's kind of like a safety linebacker, kind of hybrid type of player as well. So that was, I think, a big addition to this Nebraska team. Javen Wright, Vincent Shavers, Willis McGahee, I think are some good options in there. So I think there's some decent play. I think there's some, I think there's some depth as well in this room as well. Now, I mentioned Bayer and I mentioned Bullock. They're not shooting up high up an all Big Ten list by any means. So I think there's a potential that this group could be better at linebacker this year if some of these guys really rise to the occasion. Now let's look at the secondary. It's a very experienced group. For as much as you lost on the defensive line, for as much as you lost at linebacker, I mean, secondary, you got everybody coming back pretty much except Tommy Hill. And Tommy Hill, you had to play without him due to injury last season as well. Deshaun Singleton and Marcus Buford are back at safety. Syer Wright is back at corner. Malcolm Hartzog is back at that nickel kind of spot within this Nebraska defense as well. Now, it's something that everybody looks at returning production and thinks like, oh, if you've got 80% returning production, or if your entire position group is coming back, it's automatically a great thing. Nebraska's pass defense, I think at times was maybe a little bit hit or miss last season. So sometimes when you bring a lot of guys back, how much have you really improved? We're going to find that out, I think, about Nebraska's passing defense certainly this year. But you have guys that have played Big Ten football. You have guys that have certainly seen a lot in terms of coverage and defending some passing concepts within this conference as well. I mentioned before, they have a schedule that's fairly favorable for them, I think, this year. An early season game against Michigan, I think, is going to go a long way to determining exactly what we see for Nebraska. Dylan and Dana, that thing's got to click. If you want to see the jump, if that doesn't click, hey, the rest of the thing is maybe all for naught for Nebraska this year. But if that does click really at a high level, this could be a very exciting team to watch, I'm sure, this season. Speaking of exciting to watch, speaking of anticipation, I am pumped up about the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Okay, I'm ready to go. This has been a steady team and a consistent team under P.J. Fleck. They've won 8 or 9 games in 4 of the last 5 seasons. Now, if you're a fan of Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan or Oregon or somebody like that, you'd be like, so that's a bad year for us. At a place like Minnesota, I'm not going to quite say that's statue worthy, but that is a high level of consistent play and good seasons that a place like Minnesota hasn't maybe seen a lot throughout their history since they were a blue blood back in the 60s or whenever that was. But there's a lot to be excited about this team. PJ Fleck said at media days, he says, I want our team to be delusional. I want our team to be able to shoot for the sky. And I saw a newfound energy from him in Vegas, which I love to see. He maybe calmed down a little bit the last few years, but he's pumped. He's ready to go. And I get pumped for the maroon and gold this season. Quarterback, let's talk about them because there's a lot. When I go through and talk about Minnesota, I'm going to talk about a lot of positivity, I think, through a lot of the team and what they got coming back. But quarterback is a question. You lose Max Brosmer, over 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 picks last year, but you're replacing him with a redshirt freshman. Now, it's a redshirt freshman that a lot of people in Dinkytown really, really like in Drake Lindsey. He's got a tall, NFL pocket passer type of frame. People are saying that he's got some of the most arm talent they've seen in Minnesota in a while there. But it's still his first year as a starting quarterback. He's still a very young kid. I don't know how much you can expect from him to really play outstanding football, in these first couple of parts of the season. I think he'll get better, certainly, as the year goes on. But this is a P.J. Fleck team. Okay, and I think the positive thing for Drake Lindsey is the P.J. Fleck team plays smash mouth football. They like to run the football, and this is one of the Big Ten's best running back duos, folks, here. Of course, Darius Taylor. Darius Taylor, if he's not a household name, he should be. You should know who his name is. He's rushed for over 1,700 yards and 15 touchdowns in his career at Minnesota. That's 2 years. He's actually yet to have a 1,000-yard season. Fun fact, he came 14 yards short of that last season. We've been talking about him, for a couple of years here now, and it's just it's kind of weird that he hasn't gotten to that point, to be honest with you as well. A.J. Turner and Cam Davis transfer in to provide a lot of depth. Turner from Marshall, 864 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. Cam Davis was really good at Washington in 2022, where he had over 500 yards and 13 touchdowns. Injuries have kind of plagued him a little bit, but if he can get back healthy and he feels strong yet again, I think he can really provide a role in the depth in this running back room. We saw Marcus Major kind of do that with the Gophers last season as well. So, young quarterback. You got a run game that you can lean on. That's one of the better running back tandems in the conference. Okay, that's good if I'm a young quarterback where I don't feel like I have to go out there and be Superman from day number 1. Now let's talk about this offensive line a little bit. There's been a very good offensive line culture these last handful of years at Minnesota, putting guys into the National Football League. But there are some questions in this group, like questions at quarterback, questions at offensive line. I will admit, I don't love that. I don't love that right off the bat. Phillip Daniels transfers to Ohio State. You lose Quinn Carroll and Ariante Ursery. We talk about some of these offensive linemen that Minnesota has had these last few years. Ursery is maybe the best of them all. Last year, he was the Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, 2-time All-Big Ten selection, and a second-round draft pick as well. Greg Johnson anchors the group at center. He started all 13 games last season. But like I said, there's a lot to replace in this group. Okay, how good is this offensive line going to be able to be to pave the way for this run game and to be able to protect Drake Lindsey? The last thing you want is for protection to break down consistently, especially early in the season, especially with a young quarterback. So protection is going to be immensely important for Minnesota. Now, despite that, Drake Lindsey, lean on the run game, and you got some good wide receivers to throw to. And that's even after they lost Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer, Minnesota's top 2 receivers last year, who combined for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns a year ago. Lemeke Brockington is back. He's certainly been there for a few years. He's a veteran within this room. But they had 3 names in the portal. Logan Loya, a veteran, shifty guy coming in from UCLA. He's going to work out of the slot. Javon Tracy is that burner that comes up from Miami of Ohio. He had over 800 yards and 7 scores last year in the MAC for the Redhawks. And then Malachi Coleman. Okay, this is the dark horse, maybe the diamond in the rough for the Gophers right now, because he was a 4-star recruit, top 100, 125, 150, that type of range. He went to, Lincoln East High School there. He went to Nebraska, right, the hometown school right there, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. He's got a tall, athletic body frame, and we saw like some flashes of him with the old Big Red, but man, if they can get him playing at a high level, and you've got Coleman and Loya and Tracy and Brockington, and throw in Christian Driver in there as well. There's some guys to throw the football to, and I think they're going to be able to spread the ball around. But Malachi Coleman, I know Javon Tracy, I think could certainly be a really good player. Coleman might have the highest ceiling of them all. Maybe not this year, but certainly when all of these guys' career have come to an end as well. So, offensive line, quarterback, maybe a little bit concerns, but I really do like the skill positions for Minnesota's offense. So, the Gophers lose another the defensive coordinator. Of course, it was Joe Rossi. Now it's Corey Heatherman. But I don't think that's going to set Minnesota back. It hasn't really set them back in the past. Danny Collins is finally going to get his opportunity for Minnesota. Okay, he was a secondary coach, I think all the way back to PJ's days at Western Michigan. So he's been with PJ for a very long time, and now he's going to get his chance. And if there's one position group that, considering what we've seen out of Minnesota, that I would want elevated, it is the secondary coach, because, man, is this becoming safety you real quick. I mean, they lost Justin Wally. He was over at corner. But, man, I love this secondary this year for Minnesota. Of course, we know about Antoine Winfield Jr. We know about Tyler Nubin and those guys. And Coy Parrish. Esco, Minnesota, baby. If you haven't been, go give it a visit sometime up near Duluth. But he is one of the best weapons, and I think overall, all-around players within college football. There is a reason why Ohio State pressed as hard as they possibly could on signing day when this happened. I am so happy that this kid stayed home. I'm so happy, and PJ just beams about him every time he talked about him. Coy Parrish had 5 interceptions last year. He just trotted out from Esco, Minnesota. And if you know anything, I cover high school football here in this state. They're not playing at the highest level. They're not playing 6A football here in Minnesota. Let me just say that. So he went from that level of football all the way to the Big Ten, and he just looked like an experienced player. I mean, he looked like one of the best players on the field every single time. His athleticism is off the charts. His intelligence is off the charts as well. PJ Fleck said at Big Ten Media Days, he'll be on special teams, he'll be on defense, and he's going to be on offense. Travis Hunter of the Big Ten. Anybody, if you don't know the name Coy Parrish, you're going to know the name Coy Parrish by the end of this season. He will be a household name nationally, I guarantee it. That's how much I believe in what Coy Parrish can do. And boy, you have him as a weapon on offense as well as what he can do on defense. Man, PJ just stays up at night probably thinking, how can I get the most out of this kid? Because he can put victories on the board with his play. No doubt about it. I have no doubt about that in my mind right now. Now, Kerry Brown flew under the radar, just a little bit last year due to Coy's performance, but he was kind of another young guy, but he's back out there. Aiden Gooseby started 8 games in the secondary, and they brought in Jaden Bowden from the portal, a good FCS guy as well. So this is a group I think that's going to be able to force some turnovers. This is a group I think that's going to be able to cover well. It's just another year in the secondary out there in Minneapolis. The front 7 loses players like Cody Lindenberg and Danny Strago, but I think these groups are still good. They return starters like Jalen Logan-Redding and Devin Eastern on the defensive line. Maverick Baranowski is back at linebacker. Anthony Smith had a 6-sack season. Jackson Howard was he played high school football here in the Twin Cities at Robbinsdale Cooper. Highly recruited. He went to LSU, and now he's back at Minnesota. Didn't play as much last year. I think this year is a year where they're expecting him to try to achieve that level of play and that hype maybe that he had coming out of high school. Rashawn Lawrence comes in at defensive tackle after a 9-sack season at the FCS level. Devin Williams played in all 13 games with 2 starts at linebacker. As well, Jeff Roberson transfers in at linebacker from Oklahoma State. 58 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks as well. So I think when you look at all 3 levels of the defense, there's a lot to be excited about when you look at Minnesota's defense as a whole. Really, I think there's a lot to be excited about with their team as a whole. Like, their 2 toughest games are both on the road, at Oregon and at Ohio State. They get a ton of their 50-50 games at Huntington Bank Stadium, and that is going to be a big advantage for Minnesota. If you're looking for a team to be a surprise team, to maybe make their way to 9 wins, 10 wins, maybe a playoff berth, Minnesota. Minnesota's that team. They are a very easy over bet on their win total right now. I am confident in these Golden Gophers. Now, that's my confidence. Maybe now I'm going to flip the other way. And I'm not the only person to feel this way about this upcoming team. Let's talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. For the first time in over 2 decades, Wisconsin was not bowl eligible last season. Boy, have things really changed around Madison under Luke Fickell. Of course, he came in, uprooted Wisconsin's culture, uprooted Wisconsin's DNA, and now you're sitting there where this team just has not shown signs of improvement under Luke Fickell. Like, this is a program that they have digressed under Fickell. And they weren't at a great starting spot, right? We saw the program kind of declining when Paul Chryst was the head coach when he got fired in the middle of that 2022 season as well. Starting on offense, they get rid of Good Riddance to Phil Longo as their offensive coordinator. They bring in Kansas OC Jeff Grimes to be the offensive coordinator in that same position. He's running the show now on offense, and they are promising to be a more physical team, kind of get back to what makes Wisconsin. Luke Fickell said at media days, hey, we're going to be more, trying to be mold into the more traditional style of Wisconsin. I'm like, yeah, maybe a couple of years too late or something like that, but they're gonna try their damnedest certainly this season. Now, like Badger teams of old, it starts up front on the offensive line. Okay, 3 returning starters on this group: Joe Brunner, Jake Renfro, Riley Mullman over there at right tackle. Now, here's the thing. I was feeling really good about this Wisconsin O-line because they also had a guy that they got a couple of recruiting classes ago by the name of Kevin Haywood. They beat out Penn State for him at left tackle. He tore his ACL during, would that be spring ball? Yep, he tore his ACL during spring ball. That is a big loss because now they're going to have to find somebody else. And I wasn't overly confident in the depth on the offensive line for Wisconsin, so we'll see how that all certainly shakes out as well. Running backs, offensive line running backs. Like, this is old school Wisconsin football, right? That's how we're starting things off here in this, talking about the Badgers. It's young. It's talented, despite losing their leading rusher, Tawi Walker. Now, Darian Dupree got a lot of run as a true freshman. 317 yards and a score last year. Dylan Jones did not get as much run, but I thought Dylan Jones was the better running back, and he was the more highly rated running back coming out of high school than Darian Dupree. So that's the combination, okay? You're looking for those two to really look like Wisconsin running backs, start to look like Wisconsin running backs this season. If you have an offensive line that's at the very least good, and if you get this run game getting back to, I'm not saying you got to be Monty Ball, I'm not saying you got to be James White, I'm not saying you got to be Melvin Gordon. Those are extremely high expectations for Wisconsin. I'm just saying you got to get back to a group that you can rely on consistently, and you can win the line of scrimmage, and you can break out big runs and create big plays within the run game. Cade Yakimelli is a back that's shown some promise, 274 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's kind of maybe a smaller, more shifty type of guy as well. Okay. Badgers have had terrible luck at quarterback, injury-wise, these past couple of years under Luke Fickell. Of course, Tanner Mordecai. Last year was Tyler Van Dyke against Alabama. And what did we learn those last 2 years? Braden Locke ain't the guy. this ain't going to work. So he's out, and they had to retool their entire quarterback room as well. Via the portal, they bring in first Billy Edwards coming over from Maryland. 5th in the Big Ten in passing last year, over 2,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's the second returning passer in the conference behind only Drew Aller. They also brought in Danny O'Neal as insurance from San Diego State. He had over 2,200 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions last year. So let's talk about Billy a little bit. I think there were games where you saw that he could sling the ball down the field, like the Minnesota game for Maryland last year. He turned the football over a lot, made some bad decisions, albeit against a very good secondary out there as well. But Billy, you just need to be reliable. You need to stay healthy. I don't think that they're going to put too much pressure on Billy Edwards to be this great guy to win them a bunch of games, put the team on his shoulders, that kind of thing, because that's not the offense that they're trying to run anymore. I think they're trying to really invest once again into the run game in what makes Wisconsin great. But I think Billy is he's a good enough quarterback that if your run game is really good this season, he's going to be able to be good enough to really work with what you got throwing the football to over at wide receiver. So that's what I want to talk about next. And I think there's some good options. Now you lose Will Pauling, he enters the portal and he's off to Notre Dame. But Vinny Anthony is back. He was leading the team in receiving last year. 672 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's that speed guy, that burner that can certainly get over the top. Trech Kekahuna, quick guy in the slot, 3rd on the team in receiving last year. 339 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Jaden Ballard transfers in from Ohio State. He was one of those 4-star recruits. I mean, top 150 type of guys, and he just buried in the best wide receiver room in the country. So I think the hope is be okay, yeah, he's still a good player. He's just not at that Ohio State level. Okay, if he can be a really good wide receiver at Wisconsin, he can be the number 1 guy potentially on this offense as well. DeKel Crowdis transfers in from Hawaii. 302 yards and 4 touchdowns in his lone season over there. So there isn't as much depth in the wide receiver room, but I don't know if Wisconsin maybe needs as much depth in the wide receiver room, to be brutally honest with you, because of what they, I think, want to do in the run game and tight ends. We'll talk about tight ends here in just a minute. Why don't we talk about tight ends right now? I think it's very clear that is a more emphasis and an importance on the tight end position than there was in Phil Longo's offense. Now, you had Tanner Kogel a couple of weeks, maybe what seemed to be that. He ended up transferring out then during the spring portal period, and you got Lance Mason from Missouri State. Now, Mason, 590 yards, 6 touchdowns at Missouri State last season at 6'4", 240. So I think it was very clear to me that they wanted a great receiving tight end in this transfer class, and they were very motivated to go out and get one. They eventually did. They had one, and now they end up with another one. So I think the tight end room is going to be more important, certainly within this offense. Tucker Ashcraft is back, as well as Jackson Aker moving from running back over to tight end. Maybe he kind of slides into that fullback type of role as well. We've seen him play that role certainly before. So I think this is a Wisconsin offense that's going to get back to being physical at the line of scrimmage, winning that battle, controlling the time of possession, working off that play action, getting some easy looks down the field, and having some of your guys create certainly that way. Let's look to the defensive side of the ball. Mike Tressel returns as the defensive coordinator. Kind of like last season, though, I'm not sold on this defensive line. And I think they're depending on a lot of these transfers to be able to hit. This is a defensive line that did not create a lot of pressure. Put a lot of pressure on their secondary to be able to cover for a long period of time. They lose James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal to Illinois. Elijah Hills is out of eligibility. Now, Ben Barton does return. He started every game at defensive end. You've got Charles Perkins from UT Martin. You got Parker Peterson from Tulane. You got Javier Suggs, from LSU. So there's maybe 2 of those guys. They got to pop. They got to pop this year for this defensive line, I think, to be better than it was last season. Now, there's some optimism in the secondary. Despite losing an all-timer, possibly, in Hunter Wohler back there at safety, Ricardo Holman is easily the leader of this group. He's been great the last 2 years. He was targeted 33 times, over 319 coverage snaps last season, the fewest of any corner in the nation with 300-plus coverage snaps, which makes a lot of sense. because he burst onto the scene in 2023 and had 7 interceptions. So I think teams are going to be like, okay, yeah, we're going to throw it to the other side of the field now based on what our 2023 film tells us about Wisconsin. Preston Zachman will likely be a player at safety to fill Woller's shoes. He's got some experience. Now, Nizer Forkerween and his eligibility, it's kind of just hanging out there. It's kind of a black cloud over this Wisconsin thing right now. They ruled him ineligible, the NCAA did. Wisconsin is filing an appeal. This is big. I think if they get him back, I really like this secondary, but we'll see if Forkerween is going to indeed play in Madison this year. Austin Brown, I think he kind of played a nickel spot. He's back, 51 tackles last season. So there's some talent. There's some experience certainly coming back in the secondary as well. You look to the linebacker room, Jake Chaney and Jaheim Thomas are gone, but Christian Allegro really started to come on late in the season. 66 tackles. He was second on the team last year. Also 5 tackles for loss. That was also second on the Badgers a year ago. I think a guy that really needs to step up is Darrell Peterson coming out of that at outside linebacker. No, he started games over the last 3 seasons, but now it's time for him to take that big jump forward and really be that pass rushing presence. Wisconsin needs to get after the quarterback to help this thing out. We know all about their schedule, folks. We know all about their schedule. This is a team that could win 4 games. This is a team that could win 7 or 8 games, depending on how much they develop, not only as a team and personnel, but also as a coaching staff as well. I think they want it. The goal is you got to get back to bowl eligibility. You got to get to 6 wins, and you need to show some improvement. You need to show some progress. We haven't seen that under Luke Fickell. Going to be interesting to see if Wisconsin can do that with Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, and Illinois, and all these good teams on their schedule. We're going to finish out our trip in the Heartland by maybe visiting the state that is more Heartland than any of them. That is the Iowa Hawkeyes. The model of consistency is Kirk Ferentz in the Big Ten. He enters his 27th year of coaching in Iowa City, and it's his 14th year with Phil Parker by his side as the defensive coordinator. All right, get rid of the jokes. I hope all of the jokes about Iowa's offense are out of your system, because they should be. Because I think you got to start throwing some respect on one Tim Lester. You got to start throwing some respect, I think, on what this Iowa offense could be this season. I think that this could be the best Iowa offense since Nate Stanley was running the show in 2019, and they were putting up half 100 in a bowl game against the USC Trojans. Now, big reason why I feel that way, Mark Gronowski. We know about the quarterback play. Spencer Petras, Cade McNamara, Brendan Sullivan, Jackson Stratton, right? It hasn't been good. We're not setting a high bar here, folks. But Mark Gronowski is just, I think he's going to be one of the highest impact transfers in the entire conference. One of the biggest difference makers out of the portal. 49-6 record at South Dakota State, a 2-time FCS All-American, a 2-time national champion, a Walter Payton Award winner as the best player out there in the FCS. He has just done it. He has seen a lot of football. He is he's an all-timer, really, at the FCS level. And for Iowa to get him was extremely important to elevate the level of the quarterback, because you certainly over these last handful of seasons couldn't say to the quarterback, all right, we got ourselves a close game. We got 2 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock. Go win us a game. Go move the ball down the field. You couldn't do that. I think now you can do that. You can put more faith in the quarterback position with Mark Gronowski running the show in Iowa City. And I think he's set up for success. I really do this season, because of this might be the best offensive line in the Big Ten. In America, I don't know. It's certainly up there. It's one of the best as well. This was a Joe Moore Award semifinalist last season. Bo Stevens, Logan Jones, first-team All-Big Ten center, Jennings Dunker, second-team All-Big Ten tackle, are all back, and they're going to plug the holes. It's just so many things you can rely on with Iowa. A great offensive line is certainly one of those things. Now, despite losing one of the best running backs in college football last year, Caleb Johnson had over 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns. This offensive line is another reason I think, to get excited about the run game and what they can do paving the way for some of these guys. Kamari Moulton and Jazz Patterson expect to form a great 1-2 tandem. They combined for 769 yards and 5 scores last year, and that was behind a 1,500-yard back which I think is impressive. Jazz Patterson is kind of a lot like Caleb, where it's like, a bigger guy. He gets running downhill, and he's really tough to be able to bring down. Now, over the last few years, Iowa's wide receiver room, they've struggled to get open. And to be honest with you, it just hasn't been very talented. But I think this year, what they have coming back at wide receiver, look, none of these guys won't probably be all Big Ten guys. Okay, let's just say that right off the bat. But I think the fact of the matter is they give them a fighting chance in the pass game. Jacob Gill, over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. He's back. He led Iowa in receiving last year. Reese Vanderzee, 176 yards and 3 touchdowns in 9 games a year ago. He was a freshman, right? So I think he could make a pretty sizable sophomore jump. Sam Phillips transfers in, a rocket, a speedster from Chattanooga. He had 818 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caden Weegan was a weapon on special teams. I think he's going to be more of a factor on the offensive side of the football, certainly this season. And tight end, what do we want with tight end? It's always great. It's always great. But if you have that wide receiver room really looking good, I think that's where things really start to make a jump. And now you're starting to catch up with where the rest of the team has been. Addison Ostrenga, Zach Ortworth are back this season at tight end. Now, I said a lot of good things about the offense for Iowa in the trenches. Now I'm going to say a lot of good things about the defense in the trenches. This is a team that is built from the inside out, and that is Midwestern Heartland heroes, Heartland football, certainly built as its best. The defensive line is 2 returning starters, Aaron Graves and Ethan Hurkett. Max Llewellyn was also in there as well, 8 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks last year. Iowa returns. Those 3 guys that I mentioned were the 3 leaders in tackles for loss and sacks. So this is a group that is returning their top havoc wreakers from a year ago. Deontay Craig and Y.A. Black are the guys that are gone. Now, you look to the linebackers, you look to the secondary, big shoes to fill. Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, gone. I mean, those are all-conference, all-American type of guys. Sebastian Castro at the cast position, he's gone. Jamari Harris is also gone, certainly as well. In the secondary, here's the thing. You have guys that have started games before, that have a handful of experience before. Deshaun Lee started 9 games last year. TJ Hall started 7 games last year. Of course, Xavier Wampa started at strong safety the last 2 seasons. I think, we've looked at Riley Moss. We've looked at Cooper DeJean. We've looked at Sebastian Castro, some of these top Iowa defensive backs. I think the next one in that line is Xavier Wampa. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Cohen Entringer, all these guys played double-digit games last season, so they have experience. You look to the linebacker group. I mean, you got 3 seniors that have awaited their turn for this role. It's like typical Iowa stuff. Not the highest recruited guys in the world, but they learn, they develop behind some of these great linebackers that Iowa has had. Seth Benson and Jack Campbell, remember those guys before that recent pair that I talked about? Carson Shar, Jaden Harrell, Jackson Rethroth is a trio to certainly keep an eye on this year at linebacker. Harrell and Shar, they've played almost every game the last 2 seasons, so kind of like the secondary. There's experience here. It's a Phil Parker defense. It's Iowa culture. It's Iowa football. I expect the defense to be really good this year. I expect quarterback to be a lot better this year. I expect the passing game to be better. And we'll see if the 2 guys in the backfield can pave the way for a really good run game. I think there's some optimism to be had if you're a fan of the black and gold.